But I would say that have American administrations tried to intervene, especially against me? The answer is yes. Clinton openly admitted it. And again, under President Obama, the State Department gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to NGOs working to topple my government. I don't intervene in American elections. They shouldn't intervene in ours.
Mr. Netanyahu, first of all, I want to wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you.
Very auspicious day for doing an interview. We read in the news this morning that the UN Permanent Commission of Inquiry against Israel, led by Navi Pillay, has just once again cited Israel for violating international law. You spent a lot of time at the United Nations as Israel's UN ambassador. Is the UN an anti-Semitic body, and have you ever considered that Israel should potentially leave the United Nations?
Yeah, I considered it a few times, and I actually stopped the payments to the UN after one particularly egregious anti-Israel move that they made. But, the best news I have is the best advice I got was from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who told me shortly after I came there, and I described it in my book, came to serve at the UN, so I met him, and he said, "You're going into the house of lies." That's how he called it, the house of lies. And remember that even in the darkest hall, if you light one candle of truth, its light will be seen far and wide. And he told me that's your job, is to light the candle of truth, before the peoples of the world. Well, I tried to do that. And you can use the podium in the UN to do exactly that. In other words, they lie about us, they slander us, they vilify us, but we can also point out the truth to the representatives of the nations and public opinion around the world. It's a good podium. It's a good bully pulpit, actually.
You talk in your book.
I bullied quite a lot there.
You talk in your book about how the Clinton administration actually put together efforts to try to keep you from becoming the prime minister of Israel.
Yeah.
Bougie Herzog, who used to lead the Labor Party, had the V15 organization, which was supported by many Obama consultants to try to prevent you from retaining.
No, State Department funds.
Right.
It's even worse.
Now, Herzog is the president of Israel, and he's about to travel to the United States just days before a general election. Are you concerned about potential U.S. election interference, and what would be your advice to Herzog on this trip?
No, I don't have to give him advice. He's sufficiently worldly and experienced not to need it. But I would say that have American administrations tried to intervene, especially against me? The answer is yes. Clinton openly admitted it. And again, under President Obama, the State Department gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to NGOs working to topple my government. There's no question in an election campaign. So there's no question about that. Was that effective? I don't think so. But I would advise them not to do it. I don't do it, contrary to common law. I don't intervene in American elections. They shouldn't intervene in ours. We're free societies, real democracies, and you don't do that in democracy.
When the Russian-Ukraine war began, then Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was very careful to take a neutral stance on the conflict. Current Prime Minister Yair Lapid has been more vocal in his support of the Ukraine and his condemnation of Vladimir Putin's attack. You probably know Vladimir Putin better than most world leaders. What do you think Israel's position should be in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, there are two issues. One is Israel's relationship with Russia vis-a-vis our conflict with Iran over the skies of Syria. I mean, we're flying side by side, and preferably not against, bumping into each other with the Russian Air Force. Our pilots and Russian pilots literally see each other through their cockpits, okay? So we want to avoid a conflict with them, and I've taken pains to do that, and I think for the good. On the Ukraine matter, I think there's no question there is a horrible tragedy taking place there. It shouldn't have taken place. It shouldn't have happened, but it is happening. And the current Israeli government has used words, but has not actually done anything beyond the humanitarian level, which I think is important. They've done important stuff on the humanitarian side, taken in more refugees, Jews and non-Jews, proportionally, probably than most, if not all countries in the world. But I can say that the question that will really come to my desk if I, in 2 weeks, become the prime minister, one a week in a month, um, would be the question of Israeli arms. That's the question that is being asked. And I've said that I will look into that when I get to when I get all the information and when I sit behind that desk. I'll look into it and then I'll decide.
You were involved in attempting to negotiate a maritime border agreement with the Lebanese for close to 10 years.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Yair Lapid becomes the prime minister. The formula of the negotiations completely changes, and he's able to very quickly...
Formula of the negotiation, it's called capitulation. It's not formula for negotiation. Have you become a diplomat? Or is that what you're trying to dress it up? I mean, they gave up unilaterally everything that we were fighting for. 20 times the area of Greater Tel Aviv. You know, they just ceded it to the Lebanese, who were amazed. They couldn't believe that they were getting this bonanza of territorial, of economic waters and gas and so on. And that, you know, that you can argue with whatever you want to argue about it, but two things. One, common sense and common practice dictates that they bring it to the Knesset, they wouldn't do it for approval. And second, and that's the worst, you can't argue this. This deal was done after Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, sent drones, attack drones, against our gas fields in the Mediterranean with a clear threat, spoken threat, in which he said, I'll make Israel give us everything we demand by the threat of our arms. That, I think, is the worst thing about this deal.
Did you see a formula where Israel could have kept the Kana reservoir?
Yeah, well, we certainly got better deals. I mean, that's why we didn't have an agreement, because the Hezbollah for 10 years was asking for what they just got, and we wouldn't give it to them. Now, in 3 months, he just capitulated. But the capitulation under a terrorist threat by a terrorist chieftain, I think, is just a horrible blow to our deterrence, and I'll have to restore our deterrence, as I always do after a leftist government serves there. I'll have to restore our deterrence if I come into office in 2 weeks.
In the third election cycle, you boldly pledged to annex the Jordan Valley to Israel, formally annex it. Then it kind of got thrown in with the signing of the Abraham Accords, where you agreed to suspend the annexation.
No, I didn't agree to suspend. I had an agreement to have Israeli law apply, or annexation as it's popularly called, in the Jordan Valley and a third of Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, and areas that everybody knew would remain in Israel, because these are, you know, people describe them as isolated settlements and so on. They're not isolated. I mean, 90% of the Jews, of the Israeli citizens who live in Judea, Samaria, live in suburbs. They're no different from Georgetown to Washington, or Brentwood to Los Angeles. Suburbs of our major cities, and the remainder live in a few points that are really minuscule and not significant. So I said, they're going to stay there as part of Israel in any case. Half of Jerusalem is defined wrongly as a settlement, until, by the way, the United States changed that recently under Trump. They recognize the legitimacy of Israeli so-called settlements. So basically, the reality is that a third of that area, which includes biblical sites, strategic sites, and these suburbs, these Jewish suburbs of our major cities, they're going to stay in Israel no matter what. We'd like more, possibly everything, but that's not the point. The point is everybody recognizes this part will stay. So why not recognize it the way Trump recognized Jerusalem as our capital? And it's been that way for 3,000 years since King David, so why not recognize this reality too? And I thought that I would act on that, but I didn't want to act on it without an agreement with the American administration, because otherwise it would flare up to an international crisis that is not warranted. We had an agreement to do that. We didn't surprise the president. We exchanged letters to that effect on the eve of discussing the Trump plan. The president himself spoke about it. And then, not minutes later, but a couple of hours later, I was surprised, because this understanding didn't hold. The American government backed off. You can ask them why they backed off, but I I would still try, and I will try, to resume that course if I get elected, and to get America to recognize that this moves peace forward. Because you can't, the reason you don't have peace with the Palestinians is because they refuse to recognize Israel under any boundary for a century now. Whereas the other Arab countries where we've made peace deals with, basically embraced the idea of the Jewish state. As long as they cling to the unrealistic assumption that we're going to dismantle half of Jerusalem and dismantle these suburbs, you ain't going to get peace. You're going to get nothing. And that's effectively, I think, something that will advance peace, because you cannot build peace in the Middle East on fantasy. Any peace built on lies and fantasy will crash under the rocks of Middle Eastern realities. It's about time to recognize what is going to be, what is there and what is going to be.
It appears that one of the major components of the Abraham Accords was that the Palestinian negotiation track was completely sidelined in those normalization agreements. When the Negev Summit took place in February in Israel, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was here, and he said very publicly that the Abraham Accords were no substitute for a peace agreement with the Palestinians.
I didn't say they're a substitute, but is there a prerequisite? That is, the Palestinians have a veto, because that's what they had for a quarter of a century. After our initial peace treaties with Egypt and with Jordan, for 25 years, 24 years, a quarter of a century, we had nothing. Because everybody said, first you got to make peace with the Palestinians. Kind of hard, because the Palestinians aren't interested in peace with Israel, they're interested in the peace without Israel. They don't want a state next to Israel, they want a state instead of Israel. So if you wait for the Palestinians, you're never going to have peace with other Arab countries, because they will veto it, which they did. I got around that because I said peace doesn't go through the Palestinian seat of government in Ramallah, it goes around it. And I went directly to the Arab states, and we got 4 peace agreements with 4 Arab states in 4 months. Well, obviously with a lot of clandestine meetings and preparations before it. But that just goes to show you, if you wait for the Palestinians, you're not going to get peace. You're going to get stagnation and ultimately war. If you go around the Palestinians, rejectionists, and go to the Arab world, first get the 99%, then come back to the 1%. Don't let the 1 or 2% of the Palestinians wag the body of the Arab world, which is what American policy and Western policy in the main was doing for so many years, for decades. It's just silly and wrong, and proven wrong.
You mentioned the 4 historic normalization agreements with Muslim majority countries. Why do you think that you and the leaders of those countries didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize for that accomplishment?
Oh, God, I don't know. I think the Nobel Committee, I don't want to speak against the Nobel Prize, but all these Nobel Prize in the sciences are much valued. Some of them in literature, not all of them, are much valued. But in fact, one of the recipients of the Nobel Prize for Literature was Shai Agnon, a great writer, who my brother Yoni and I used to see in the synagogue in our neighborhood home in the southern suburb of Jerusalem, Talpiot. And I described that in my book. But as far as the Peace Prize is concerned, for God's sake, Arafat got the Peace Prize. I mean, the preeminent terrorist of our time gets the Peace Prize. After he gets the Peace Prize, he launches a wave of suicide bombings to claim the lives of over 1,000 Israelis. So I don't think much of the Peace Prize, and I'm not particularly concerned with not having received it. And I think history is a better judge of contributions to peace than a politically correct committee in Scandinavia.
Working together with President Trump, you accomplished more possibly than any pair of president and prime minister had accomplished for the state of Israel in a short period of time. What do you think that you could have accomplished had both your administration and the Trump administration remained in office for a few more years?
First of all, I think we could accomplish more in the years we were there, because we spent 3 years going down the rabbit hole of a Palestinian peace, only to discover that they don't want peace. I knew that in advance, but it took a while to persuade the Trump administration, if we did. But in my first meeting with President Trump, and I described this in my book, I said, there are 4 peace treaties to be had right away. If we pursue them, we waited until the 4th year and happily achieved these 4 historic peace accords, the Abraham Accords. But I think the big prize is peace with Saudi Arabia, which I intend to achieve if I go back into office. And I think there's a chance I will achieve it because I think Saudi Arabia and many of the other Arab countries who haven't yet made peace with us know that I'm absolutely committed to preventing Iran from having nuclear weapons, which is something that they are keenly interested in. So I think there's a correlation between the rise of Iran and the rise of Israel. The rise of Israeli power facilitated the Abraham Accords, and the continual nurturing of Israeli power will also nurture, I think, a broader peace with Saudi Arabia and nearly all of the rest of the Arab world. I intend to bring the Arab-Israeli conflict to a close.
You talked in the book pretty extensively about how President Obama tried to prevent you from taking military action against the Iranian nuclear program. Then you had several years in which President Trump was in office. And assuming he didn't give you a green light to attack, he still probably would have provided the best cover that a US president could have provided for such a strike. Do you regret not launching an attack on Iran during the Trump years?
No, I think we did a lot of things that I can't itemize. One thing has been public. I sent the Mossad to the heart of Tehran, and we pilfered the Iranian secret atomic archive, which I think revealed to the world how much Iran is lying, and also revealed some secret nuclear installations, which now Iran refuses to have inspected by the International Atomic Energy Agency. But we did a lot of things that I won't get into, but that in fact delayed the Iranian nuclear program. But the task is still before us. I don't shirk away from it. On the contrary, that's the other major reason I want to go back into office, and that is to roll back Iran's nuclear program, and I think we have the means to do it.
In the book, you talk a lot about Obama actually as an antagonist. Well, you're the protagonist of your own book. But you're very careful.
I'm writing my own book. What
Exactly.
do you expect?
But Obama's the antagonist during those years to a certain extent. But you're very careful to be much friendlier towards then Vice President, current President Joe Biden. And it is clear that he does exhibit some strong, deep sentiments towards the Jewish state. But you quote Biden as saying, Bibi, I love you, but I don't agree with the word you say. And to which you reply, on many occasions, the feeling was mutual. Right?
Well, you don't have to quote me. You can hear him say it on Israeli television.
Are Biden's policies actually very different from Obama's?
I think on the question of Iran, it remains to be seen. I think the pursuit of the nuclear agreement with a regime that oppresses its people brutally, and I have to take my hat off to the brave men and brave women of Iran. They're incredible. And they reveal what this regime is really about. Now, you're going to give a radical Islamist regime that chants death to America the means for mass annihilation? That's crazy. But that's what this deal does. And I said to Joe Biden, I think it's a mistake to go for this deal. At most, it would delay this program by a year or two, but it would pave its way with gold, with hundreds of billions of dollars of sanction relief that Iran could use to build a mighty nuclear arsenal and also to foment its terror and aggression, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide. Don't do that. And you're not disappointed of disagreement, and I hope right now that they have second thoughts. Obama didn't. He went right ahead, and I think that was a source of conflict. And while I appreciated the fact that I had some points of agreement with him, especially on the MOU that gave a 10-year American support for Israeli military aid, by the way, 75% of which is spent in the United States, back in American industry. Still, I value that, as I did with Clinton before him. And so you can have points of agreement, but there was a fundamental point of disagreement. Sure about the Palestinians, but more so, and dramatically so, on the question of this dangerous nuclear deal that paves Iran's path to the bomb with gold. And so I was against it. It threatens my country, and I had to take a very difficult decision, which I deliberated considerably about, whether to go into the U.S. Congress, a joint session of Congress, to speak up against a deal being promoted by a sitting American president. And normally I wouldn't do that. but I decided my country's very survival is on the line, so I did do it.
You talk in the book a little bit about how the Obama administration waxed lyrical about soft power.
Yeah.
And you say that hard power is even better. And obviously, you've worked to develop Israel's hard power capacity. You write that that was the central mission of your years in office. Now, the Palestinians don't have hard power as compared to Israel. That's obvious. And they've been launching a soft power campaign of delegitimization
And also
against the Jewish
terror,
state.
that's hard power.
Sure, but compared to Israel,
Yeah.
it's, you know, but really the delegitimization campaign is that they've launched and organized has taken hold. Do you think that the delegitimization campaign against Israel represents an existential threat?
I think it's dangerous, but I also want to put it in proportion. Remember the Arab boycott that was supposed to boycott Israel? Well, the hard power of Israeli economic power and technology made the boycott absurd. Nobody can boycott Israel because you boycott yourself. You know, you have a cellular phone in your hand. Who doesn't? Half of it is made in Israel. Half of the software is made in Israel. You drive a car, you use the GPS navigational system, you use Waze, that's made in Israel, and so on and so on. Medicines and other things and so on that serve humanity. So the economic boycott has crashed in the face of Israeli power. And let me tell you something. The delegitimization was also crash in the face of Israeli power. But the most important power that we need to delegitimize the delegitimizers is the inside internal conviction of the justice of our cause, presented forcefully. I mean, they call us colonists. We're not the Belgians in the Congo. We're not the Dutch in Indonesia. We're Jews, for God's sake. We came from Judea. We've been attached to this land for 3,000 years, 3,500 years to be exact, from the time Abraham came here. You remember Abraham? You know what the name of his grandson was? Benjamin. You know, that's my name. You know, we're here. We're rooted here. And it's the Arabs who invaded this country in the 7th century and depopulated it. And we brought it back to life after years of tremendous neglect. To the benefit of both its Arab and Jewish residents alike. So I think the most important thing is that we believe in the justice of our cause, and I'm delighted that there are hundreds of millions of people around the world, evangelical Christians and others, who know the truth and fight back this slander.
Now, Israel shares many liberal values with the West, but Western society, both in Europe and in the United States, appears to be on a downward trajectory, not just economically, but even the moral foundations of these places are being challenged. Are you worried about the shifting of the global balance of power between
Yes.
the West?
Yes, I am, because I think that ultimately it's not, well, I often say soft power isn't enough because I think you need hard power to buttress it. And without it, soft power of culture and values and so on is largely useless. I mean, you had the Mongol Empire, which wasn't exactly dedicated to human rights, control a good chunk of the world with overwhelming power. The Roman Empire did the same. And Hitler almost did it. If he had gotten the atomic bomb early enough, he would have done the same. So soft power without hard power is not enough. But soft power is also necessary in the sense of recommitting ourselves to what it is we're fighting for. And I think you need a union of the like-minded countries, the democratic countries, shorn of the progressive radicals that basically undermine the fundamental values of our society. The progressive extreme radicals who hate Israel in the United States also hate America in the traditional values that guided it. And I think that this is something that doesn't bode well for our country. So yes, you asked me about the future of our civilization. I think I tend to come out on the more optimistic side, because I think that what happens to people who sort of lose track of where they are and what keeps them together, they get mugged by reality. And Churchill said that democracies tend to slumber until they're awakened by the jarring gong of danger. Well, we can see a lot of jarring gongs of danger waking us up. And I think we will wake up. I think we are. I don't think I don't think we in Israel need to be woken up, but I think collectively, yes, we're challenged. But I have faith that the values of freedom and democracy will overcome if we couple them with a belief in their importance and the military and economic strength to back them up in the face of those who challenge them.
You talk about the economy. The U.S. economy has been declining, yet Israel has in many ways tied the strength of its own currency to the U.S. dollar by buying over $200 billion of foreign currency reserves. The Central Bank of Israel has been raising interest rates alongside a rise in interest rates in the United States. Do you think that Israel should be tying its economic success to the dollar, or should be taking different policies?
No, I don't think we should tie it to anything. I mean, I think we should. First of all, I liberated the Israeli currency. You know, it was you couldn't take out $200. Well, you could $2,000 or something like that without getting a clearance from the central bank. I opened up all the foreign exchange rates, so I made the dollar a free floating currency in the world, and its value goes up as the Israeli economy goes up. And because I instituted a free market revolution, which was very tough, and I describe it in detail in the book that the memoirs. What happened was that Israel went from a contraction of 1% a year, a contraction of its GDP, to 5% within a year and a half, and it stayed that way for a decade. So as a result, Israel, under these free market reforms, now has its GDP per capita, income per capita, has now overpassed Britain, France, Japan, and most recently, Germany. So Israel's become a fairly wealthy country because of these free market reforms. And I think that's what you need to peg the shekel to, free market reforms, because we still have a lot of bureaucracy. And that, you know what that is? That's a growth engine. You know why? Because when you remove it, the economy jumps up for another decade. And I think Israel can be one of the perhaps amid the top 5 wealthiest countries in the world, barring countries that are banks like Luxembourg or something like that. You know?
Now, in the last election cycle, Naftali Bennett basically turned against the will of his right-wing voters, and he formed a government together with every single member of Israel's left wing, and also with
the Islamic Brotherhood.
Right. Now, some members of the right-wing camp suggest that if you do cross the magic threshold of 61, that you too might actually form a government with members of the center and the left, as you have done several times in the past. What kind of guarantee can you give to the voters that you would form a right-wing government?
Well, that's the first thing that I will do. I mean, I wouldn't do anything. Why should I? Why should I form a left-wing government? The time that I had to incorporate members of the left was when Bennett himself, in the previous election, would not join my government because he said, take away some of your right-wing partners and bring Yair Lapid's left-of-center government into the coalition. So it was under a parliamentary duress. I wouldn't do that. Why would I? I mean, with all due respect, these people believe in a Palestinian capital in Jerusalem. They believe in a Palestinian state, which would necessarily become an armed Palestinian state. And I've always said that's not going to happen. You know, these things are against my views. Why should I sacrifice my views? What, to get a favorable op-ed for 2 minutes in the New York Times? Come on, I'm not there. I'm serious.
You just published your memoirs. If there's one takeaway for readers, what would that one takeaway be?
Well, many, but I would say number one, peace through strength is not a slogan. It's a reality. We cannot ensure the peace of our societies and the survival of our societies without nurturing the strength and spirit and body. That's the first thing, and that's what I've devoted my life. And the second is the whole story of the Jewish state, the Jewish people, as I've experienced it and had an opportunity to contribute to it, which I think is also a contribution to human freedom, because I think the story of Israel is a parable. It's a parable that says that a free people, if they muster their resolve and their courage, can overcome the most threatening odds of history. So it gives hope for everyone if we can cross the this raging river between annihilation and salvation, as no other people has, then there's hope for everyone.
Benjamin Netanyahu, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.